All right. So today I want to talk a little bit about coaching with 3D, but specifically geared towards beginner players. It's something that I hear all the time talking to coaches that they feel like 3D is too complicated and it's not necessary for beginner players, that it's just too much information. And I just want to run through some examples on how I use it with my students and really how they enjoy using 3D because 3D can be as simple or as complicated as we want to make it. So I'm just going to start. I wouldn't say this player is a beginner. I'm going to go with more of like an intermediate player here. But I'm going to start with him here. Now, what we're going to look at for him is his sway numbers and his pelvis turn numbers because those numbers are what's going to change a little bit for him from the before and the after. When we take a look at his golf swing, what we're going to notice is that he doesn't turn his hip a whole lot like early on in the backswing. You'll see that it has 13 degrees of pelvis turn. And he's also getting 2.7 inches of sway away from the target with both the chest and the pelvis. So when a player doesn't turn their hip a lot early on, what we'll notice is typically they are going to have a little bit more sway with their pelvis away from the target. And that's what's happening here with this player. And as he goes up to the top, then you're going to continue to see how chest, pelvis have moved now 3.5 inches away from the target. And as he gets up to the top, now he's going to try to really turn his hip, but he's just not going to get a whole lot of rotation here in that hip. And so what that's doing is it's making it so that he's swaying off the golf ball too much. And when he sways off the golf ball too much, then on the way down, he needs to try to get back towards the target. So his hip is going to start to slide in front of him. And that's going to cause him to start to hang back on the ball a little bit too much. And he's going to start to get the club too far inside to where he's hitting some big pushes and big hooks. And by the time he gets down into impact, you can see that his pelvis is 5.5 inches, his chest is 1 inch towards the target. So he has a little bit too much pelvis sway here on the way down. And if we go all the way up to the top, right, where he had 3.1 inches of pelvis sway, that means he's swaying, 8 inches into impact, which is just a lot. The PGA Tour is going to be 4. So when I talked to this player, I kept it really simple. How I framed this for him was, hey, on the way back, what we're going to notice is that your pelvis just hasn't turned enough to start. We can get your pelvis to turn a little bit more. That's going to allow you to stay more centered to where you're not moving off of the golf ball as much with your sway numbers. And doing those things is what's going to help you then not have to go swaying 8 inches in total on the way down to where you start hanging back and you'll get that two-way miss. So really simple how we can just kind of word that for a player and frame it for that player. When we look at him then sending me, some videos, this is one of my online students I work with. When we look at his golf swing now from the after, we're going to notice right away that his pelvis is turned more and that he's way more centered than he was before. So when I go ahead and I pull up the same numbers, right, we're going to go with that pelvis turn, pelvis sway, chest sway. As he goes all the way up to the top, you're going to notice a difference here. So a little bit more pelvis turn, right? It's about 4 to 5 degrees more with the pelvis. We're still going to see some lateral movement off of the golf ball, but it's not as much. And as he gets up to the top, what we're going to notice is that his pelvis is staying a lot more centered. It's going to be, let's call it 0. And his chest is going to be almost 1.5 inches away from the target. And look, pelvis is now at 40 degrees, where before it was at like 35 degrees. So right there, it's just really easy for this player to understand, all right, all I'm trying to do is get a little bit more turn with my pelvis. And then now he can see how his sway has changed because of that. Then on the way down, as he starts swinging through the golf ball, he's not going to hang back as much. He's going to get forward with both the chest and the pelvis, a little bit too much of what I would prefer. But this is definitely a better pattern for him. He's not going to be hitting some big pushes or anything. he's going to be having, you know, a lot more consistent start lines and just overall ball flight with that. So right there, great first example of how we can use this with some of our more amateur players. Now, the next player that I'm going to pull up here, he is more of a beginner player. And what we're going to notice for him here, when I pull up his chest bend number, we'll pull up the pelvis sway number, chest sway as well. What we're going to notice for him is on the way back, he's going to have some of that lateral movement, right? 2.7 inches away with the chest, 2.1 away with the pelvis, but he has 10 degrees of forward bend. And if you look at it from a 2D standpoint, right, he looks very bunched up. He looks like he doesn't have enough turn and, you know, just very compact. What we'll notice for him is then on the way down, his chest wants to get swaying towards the target. All right. And so he's going to start to get his hands to push out. His chest is going to start to sway towards the target to the point where it's almost getting out in front of his pelvis now. And when that happens, this is moving his hand path so that it starts pushing out. So on the way down, his hands are going to start going out, and then that's going to start causing him to try to swipe across it. And obviously that's going to cause some big misses. So with this player, you know, I simply just showed him his numbers. I didn't need to go too in depth on what was happening. I just let him know, like, hey, on the way back here, Brandon, what we're going to see is that you're swaying a little bit too much to start off of the golf ball. We're going to notice that your arm, his trail arm specifically, is starting to get a little bent, and it's making it so that he's not really hinging the golf club. And because of that, that's making it so that he's getting all that forward bend with his chest. And on the way down, he's then going to get over the top and hit those big pulls and big slices that he was dealing with. So from a drill perspective, honestly, we just worked on him turning a little bit better with his pelvis and his chest, getting a better takeaway to where the arms got a little bit more extended, and him hinging the club. So from like a very basic, you know, kindergarten level here, we're working on our Y and we are working on the L. And what I can then do is show him the difference, right? So this is his second lesson that he then took with me, and we can see the difference already in his golf swing, right? I told you that we were working on his pelvis turning a little bit more, working on getting that right arm to be a little bit more extended. Now you can see how it has that extension there. And as a result, we're going to see some better movements here in the pelvis and with that chest bend. As he goes all the way up to the top, you're going to see here that he's now at -2 for his bend at the top. Chest and pelvis still have a little bit of sway, but we will notice that they're right over one another. So they're both 2 inches, which that's not too bad. As he then starts the downswing, he's still used to his hands trying to get pushed out. So he still has that a little bit. But this club isn't coming over the top nearly as much, and he's going to hit it a lot better because of that. So, you know, this is just a really good way to help your players understand, you know, how they're getting better and help them quantify some of their feelings. In lesson number 2, what we were looking for with him was that pelvis turn and the trail arm. Okay, so when we would look at the lead elbow flexion, we were trying to see it at that 172. And so he would go through his practice and working through this drill of just getting a really good takeaway, taking the club back to club parallel, and just we would check, okay, how much does he have for his lead elbow flexion or trail elbow flexion? And then from there, we would notice that his pelvis would turn a little bit more, and we noticed he wasn't swinging off the golf ball as much. And those were the things that he can then think about and feel in order to help him get this position, because obviously this is a lot better than where he came to me to start. So another really good example, this is, I would consider him more of a beginner. Doesn't shoot the lowest score, has been playing golf for a little bit. But what I'm going to show you for him is his sway numbers, just because his sway numbers get a little bit off here. Now, when you're using Sportsbox to start, I think you can teach a lot of lessons with just turn and sway. Where the chest and the pelvis are in relation to one another is really, really important. And so when we see Matt here take the golf club back and go up to the top, we're going to notice how his chest has 3.5 inches of chest sway away from the target, and his pelvis has 1.9. And so what that's doing is it's getting him to have a little bit too much forward bend at the top as well. Now, why that's important is because now what's going to end up happening for Matt here is his pelvis is going to want to go sliding on the way through. So watch how his pelvis here goes sliding on the way down. We're going to see how his upper body starts to hang back on it. That gets the golf club coming from the inside, but it's too far inside. He has to lose his posture in order to try to control a low point. And you can see the face is just going to have a hard time squaring up all the time. And so with these swings, because of how much his chest was swaying off the golf ball, we were seeing that he just kept pushing it out to the right all the time. And so for Matt, when I was working with him, it was just really simple. Hey, Matt, on the way back here, we're noticing that you're swaying 3.5 inches off the golf ball at the top. We want to get that to be closer to 0 inches. And how that's going to help you, it's going to make it easier for you not to hang back on it and make it so that the face will be able to square up a little bit better. And when we look at it from the after with Matt, we're going to see a huge improvement. So once again, I'll pull up those sway numbers for Matt here. And now as Matt goes up to the top of his backswing, we're going to see here that his chest has now moved 2 inches instead of 3.5. So it's not perfect, but it's definitely better. And it made a huge improvement in his swing to where he wasn't getting his pelvis to start sliding too far in front of him. He was able to then start the golf ball on a little bit better start line there as he was going through this. So for Matt, what we did a lot of the time was like a pool noodle or some sort of feedback here that would be held right by his right ear, just trying to make it so that he couldn't touch that noodle or that golf club or whatever we put there, right? Some coaches will have their players stand in like a door frame and make some backswings. Those are things that we were able to do to help him start to feel, okay, how much is my chest swaying? And so for Matt, this felt like it was very, very exaggerated. He felt like he was at 0, but we could tell him, all right, you're at 2. And if you're at 2 inches, now he knows, okay, I can still exaggerate that a little bit more. And so it helps him really start to quantify what he's feeling and allowed him to be able to make some changes a little bit faster because of that as well. So last little example here. This is one of my high school players that I work with, or he just went into high school, I should say. Very new to golf. He wanted to make the golf team, so he's been getting lessons from me now for a few months. And what we're going to notice for him is he's going to get a ton of turn. But once again, his pelvis and his chest sway were a little bit off. And like I said before, you can teach a lot of different lessons just looking at chest sway and pelvis sway. And honestly, for me, I might not even be telling the player exclusively that, hey, I want to work on you not moving, side to side as much. I don't want you to move 3.8 inches away from the pelvis. There's probably some things that I can do without them knowing. And in Casey's world, that's definitely true. So what we're going to notice for Casey at the top of his golf swing is his pelvis has moved 4 inches away from the target and his chest has moved 3 inches away from the target. He has a lot of turn, basically can barely even see the golf ball at this point. And all that ends up happening then is on the way down, he has a really hard time getting through the golf ball. All right. He's not going to be able to really transfer his weight into that lead side. He's going to kind of stay back on everything in order to make good contact. And that's just stemming from that top position, just because of how much that his pelvis and chest has moved away, especially because his pelvis is further away from the target than his chest. on the way down, his chest is then going to stay in front of his pelvis. And then from there, he's just not going to get too forward on it. So when we look at Casey here from his after, we're still going to see that he needs to not turn as much. But we will notice that his sway numbers have improved a little bit here. So as he gets up to the top, pelvis is now at 1.2, chest is at 0.8. This is much, much better for him. And that then will allow him to get to his lead side a little bit more, to where he can actually start to compress the golf ball a little bit better. So, before he was at 1.5 inches of pelvis sway at impact with his pelvis. Now he's at 4.5, which is really good. So this is really, really useful in many different ways, right? As I stated earlier, it's great for helping our players be able to quantify some of their swing thoughts that they're working through. It helps them understand, am I doing this too much or not enough? Because as we all know, real versus feel are two completely different things. And it helps our players understand, okay, what I'm feeling, what is that getting me? And it helps them develop more of that proprioception and awareness in their swing. And this other part of it is, this is an amazing way to track progress. Being able to show your students right away how you're helping them improve their game is important. And yes, you could maybe show them a little bit on 2D, right, and draw some of those lines, but quantifying it goes a long ways, right? In the case of Matt, when we look at Matt's golf swing, right, before we saw that his chest at the top was, 3.5 inches off the golf ball, right? When we go look at it from the after, it's not like there was this huge improvement, but that improvement meant something to him. That improvement went a long ways to him. 1.5 inches might not seem like a lot to us as a coach, but to that player, he felt amazing that he got better that day. He felt like, okay, I know that I'm working towards the right things. I know that I'm moving a little bit better. And through practice, I'm going to continue to get that to be better and better and better. And that is something that I think is just invaluable for our students, to be able to see themselves get better and see some of these numbers change, because obviously then it keeps them bought in, it keeps them practicing, it keeps them engaged in what we're asking them to do. So 3D, yes, it can be as complicated as we want to make it, but it can also be as simple as we want to make it. And I think that's something that's really, really valuable for coaches to understand and start putting into some of these lessons. If I just pull up a swing from my photo library of, someone that's really never swung a golf club a whole lot, just as an example of, how simple we can make this once again. We can keep this really, really simple. We don't have to go diving in and show every single number. We can show one specific number if we want. And so for this player here, it's just a really good example of how we can keep it simple. On the way back, when we're looking at his golf swing, we're going to see that his right arm wants to bend a lot. And as he goes up to the top, he's just not going to have a whole lot of width, right? And so I can just go ahead and show him, like, hey, Paul, looking at your golf swing, what we're going to notice here is that your trail and lead elbow are bending too much. We want to get it so that you have the club a little bit more away from you. And we can then work on changing that. And we can start showing Paul how getting more width is extending his arms. And so it can be that simple. It can be really, really easy to do, as long as you're pulling it out and using it on a daily basis. So let me know if you have any questions on any of these examples that I ran through today. With beginner players, like I said, you can teach a lot with just turn and sway. As you get comfortable diving into it, you're going to probably start looking at chest bend a little bit more. You're going to start looking at side bend a little bit more, even the lift numbers, or
or some of the numbers that are like flexion. You'll start to really put things together and be able to communicate this in a very, very simple way to your students. Because, like I said, I get to talk to so many amazing coaches all the time. And it's one thing that I hear all the time is that coaches think my students don't need it. This is too complicated for them. And as you guys can tell, we can keep this really, really simple.